Hey, it's me again. We're looking at Chapter 2 this week, and Chapter 2 has to deal with the structure of criminal justice organizations. And this is where your discussion board comes into play this week. I'm seeing some really good things on the board, so you guys are doing a really good job. When we talk about hierarchy and we talk about organization, it depends on the department and on the agency. And so some agencies are actually just by positions, and others are in categories. So when you're looking at your discussion board trying to figure out, are you going to look at the DA's office? Or are you going to look at the sheriff's department or at law enforcement? When you start to look at these things, please note that everybody's different. Now let's take it one step further. It's even different from a local level as far as like Metro, like Savannah Metro, for example, compared to Chatham County Sheriff's Department, compared to Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, or compared even to the FBI or to any other federal law enforcement. And even at that, when you look at federal law enforcement, for example, their hierarchies will be very similar in nature, but they will have different components. So when you're working on that discussion board, please also note that these hierarchies could be actual positions, or they could be departments, and then within the department they have various positions. So if you I don't care where you work. I don't care if you're at the Chick-fil-A working. You have what we call in the military a chain of command. And when you start to get into leadership positions, they are, it's very intense driven as far as policies and procedures go. So you're going to start looking at how things are looked at from a budgetary financial standpoint. You're going to look at things from a totality of the situation. And we like that word in the legal field, totality, or what would a reasonable person think or say. And so you're looking at things from what we call 35,000 feet up in the air. In other words, if you were in an airplane at 35,000 feet and you're looking down at the situation, what would it entail? And so where when your boots on the ground, you're out in the field, you're taking care of the situation immediately, and you will deal with the repercussions later on. Because you've got a crime scene, or you've got a sting operation going, or you've got some kind of forensics or some kind of interrogation process going on, where whatever it is, you have to make those split-second decisions. You'll deal with the situation, anything that comes from it, any repercussions later on. From the leadership and organization standpoint, now we're at 35,000 feet, zoning in and looking down at the situation. We call it preventing fires instead of creating them. You want to prevent as much as you can and not have to take care of things on the ground as far as what we call fires. So these are things that we have to take into consideration. So you have a really good chart. It's figure 2.2. I'm looking at my big screen beyond you right now. It's on page 33 in your textbook. It talks about tall and flat hierarchies. Hierarchies is each level. Okay? Think about your family tree. There you go. Think about your family tree. Go back as far as you can and create, great-grandparents. I've done the Ancestry.com and got as far back as my family coming over from England and from France, but then I had to pay more, so I quit. But anyway, but I have hierarchy. So I have my great-great-great-grandparents, my great-great-grandparents, my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and now me, and now my next generation, which is my child. My daughter. So those are hierarchies. So for example, the hierarchy above me is my parents. Now my mom, she had 4 brothers. So even though they're my parents, I've got my mom and my 4 uncles, and then my dad and his sister or my aunt. So that's a hierarchy. So, and then the one above it, again, it breaks out. So I might have great grandparents, but then it breaks out. That's what we're looking at, are those breakouts. That gets to be really interesting when you start looking at putting teams together, when you're in that organization component and you're putting those teams together for, stakeouts, investigations, or whatever your job may be, whatever it might become, or investigations when it goes to, being in the public defender's office, or being, on the prosecution side. So these are things that you have to think about, okay? So we have these divisions, and everything that we do zooms in. Now, I'm just talking about one agency, okay? What happens when you have, this is something that we need to blow your mind up about. What happens when you have more than one agency involved? Oh my goodness, interagency cooperation. Yeah. We did not realize this, and I'm adding a lot of sidebars into this. So I hope you find that as I'm doing these videos, this term, that it becomes helpful to kind of like open up your brain a little bit to some of these aspects. What if you have an incident that requires multiple agencies? It happens every day. For example, you could have, we had this a few years ago. Oh, Eric, I forget his name. Sorry about that. My daughter is texting me from Paris right now. But what happens if you have, I think his name was Eric Rudolph. For example, he committed a murder in Georgia, crossed into state lines. Okay, so now we have jurisdiction in Georgia for the crime, okay? Crossed over state lines in Alabama. Now we have, and he committed a crime in Alabama. Now we have Alabama. So we had Georgia State with GBI. We had the local law enforcement for Georgia where the incident took place, the crime. So the sheriff's department, Metro, whomever, crossed state lines into Alabama. Now you had the Alabama Bureau, and now you've got the Alabama local authorities. Okay, now I'm not done yet, because now you got Georgia jurisdiction and Alabama jurisdiction, right? What just happened? He crossed state lines. When you cross state lines, it becomes what? Federal. So now the FBI is involved. So now we have 3 major agencies having to connect. On top of that, you've got local law enforcement having to connect with the state law enforcement, who's having to coordinate with the federal law enforcement. On top of that, see, it gets a lot better, right? On top of that, now you also have the federal government, Department of Justice. Now, I know the FBI is part of the Department of Justice, but I'm talking about lawyers. I'm talking about state lawyers for both states. So do you see what I'm saying? This really did not come into play as to why this was so important until 9/11, when we started figuring out that all these agencies realized what was about ready to take place. They all had intel and nobody shared. So this is where we're really talking about interagency and outer agency cooperation. Okay, so you will see a lot in this textbook about federal and state, and it's because they have to talk to each other. When you're talking about understanding criminal justice organizations, it's not about Chatham County, for example, or Bryan County. It's not talking about Cobb or DeKalb. It's talking about all these different agencies that are coming in. Now, we'll complicate this just for one split second. What happens when you have someone who commits a crime in the United States, boards an airplane, and then flies overseas and lands in a different country? And then what happens if there's no extradition? Criminals are smart. Sometimes these criminals go to countries that have no extradition requirements here in the United States. In other words, the country that they go to, which is called the receiving country, Doesn't have to send them back to the United States. Now we're talking about international. Wow. We have to coordinate all this. So it's very easy. The point I'm trying to make is this. It's very easy for us to watch the news, to listen to things, and we jump to making a quick judgment call or a quick opinion. And you may even find yourself talking to the TV or talking to the computer, like you do when it's a football game, right? When you realize that the receiver should have kept running and not zigzagged down the field, he should have just took off running. We all have our opinions on how things should operate. Same thing happens when it comes to criminal justice issues. This is where the other thing when it comes to the organization is that we have to create this liaison between law enforcement and the legal system. I'm not talking about criminal justice system. I'm talking because there's two systems, the criminal justice system and then there's the legal system. See how far apart my fingers are? That's how far apart that they really are. We have to bridge these two together. It's very important to bridge the criminal justice with the legal. So please remember that we're going to be learning a lot about this. And for those of you who've had me before, I've told you a million times before, you have to bridge these two components. Because criminal justice thinks that once they get it done, once they apprehend the bad guy and they throw it over into the court's lap, that it's over, and it's not. Criminal justice is such an important intricate part of the legal system, the courtroom. Without you guys, we can't do what we got to do on our side. So yeah, we butt heads a lot, but we're all on the same team. We're all trying to get to the same end result. So please keep that in mind as you go through this course as to what it is. You'll have what is known as total quality management. You're going to learn about this. This is more the business end of criminal justice, as far as putting human resources together, with the financials together, with the job delegation and all that kind of stuff, and putting teams together. That's what all of this structure is all about. It's about efficiency. It's about taking those policies and procedures and about implementing them at the highest level and make sure they go all the way down to the person who's in the squad car, the person who's in charge of the investigation, to the person who's receiving the orders. We'll talk a little bit the further we get into the class later on in the term about the ethics and responsibility. What is legal, what is moral, and what is ethical? Very similar, very different. Okay, so we'll look at how it is to put those procedures together. Page 39 in your text talks about jail operations, and you could use this. Whenever you go into a department, you get hired into a department or an agency or what have you, you'll notice that there will be a library of binders, and these binders are not little. They're not 1 inch. They're more like 5-inch binders, 3-inch binders, and there's a gazillion of them. And now, well, that's the way it was in my day. I guess I'm aging myself. That's probably online now, which would be very good. We won't be killing so many trees. But it's the policies and procedures on how to do things. So we have a conflict that can take place. What is the policy and procedure for implementing a task out on the field? Okay, so, but how does that now correlate with your state statute and federal statutes? So the moral of this video, because I'm not going to drag this out, you can read the text and what have you. The moral of this video is simply that not only do you have to worry about what your federal and state statutes and your local ordinances, which is your local laws, are, you have to blend those in with the policies and procedures that are set forth by your department or by your agency. And then you also have inter and intra agency obligations and responsibilities. And all of that, let's tie this together. All of that, if we go back to, I think it was page 33, my figure 2.2, if you look at that, then how does that all tie into each one of those positions in each one of those departments and each one of those agencies that you're looking at? A lot going on. So anytime that we think that we know more than what our boss knows, or anytime that we think that we know more than what the governor knows or the president of the United States knows, take 2 steps and think about this. Let me know if you have any questions. You all are doing a great job. I hope you guys are okay with doing these videos, and definitely provide your feedback. It is perfectly okay. We're all here to learn. I'm here to learn from you. I have the legal and the criminal justice background, and some of you guys just have the criminal justice background, which I am willing to learn from all of you guys as well. But yeah, feel free to post any questions, or feel free to give me feedback whatsoever, okay? And I will see you at the end of the week. Don't forget that your initial post is due tomorrow night by 11:59 p.m. And it'll be interesting to see what you guys have. And then your response to one classmate is due by Sunday night. Take that quiz, and remember, read between the lines. The white space is probably the most important part that you're going to read. Okay? Thanks a lot, and have a beautiful Wednesday. Bye.